Broadcasting from the stages of London, this is Musical Talk, the UK's first independent musical theatre podcast.
So I threw the money on the bed and I said to the girl's father...
Hello, welcome to episode number 54 of Musical Talk. That was Thos.
Oh, right, okay, sorry, are we on now?
Are we on?
That was Thos saying something. And,
Hello.
This is Tim.
Hello.
And this is Nick. Hello. Today we're going to be talking about one staple British musical and one semi-staple British musical, I guess we can call it.
It's got two staples like a magazine.
Yes. And a centrefold.
Oh, well, indeed, but...
More of that later.
We're going to be talking about a musical called Blood Brothers and another musical called Billy Elliot.
Indeed.
Which
They both begin with B.
Yes.
We've noticed. That's our analysis. Goodbye for another week.
And they're both sat outside London.
They're set
outside London in places with rather strange accents.
Well, I think we should say immediately that they share some, at least superficial similarities, don't
they? They're both, well, I mean, you might characterise them both as the northern musicals. Little northern accent.
The only northern musicals ever written.
Certainly not, but I mean, there's a Kes musical, apart from anything else, and but that another time on that. But yeah, they're both set in the north of England, and they both definitely have a lot to do with the 80s, and well, indeed are set in the 80s, and they both have a lot to do with the social issues of the 80s.
Oh, there's lots in common with them, aren't there?
So those are the superficial similarities.
Ostensibly political.
And yes, and they're both written by quite well-established playwrights. In one case, Willie Russell, and in another case, Lee Hall.
That's
John
right.
isn't a playwright.
The difference between Billy Elliot and Blood Brothers, or one of the differences, is that, of course, the score, in the case of Blood Brothers, is written also by Willie Russell along with the lyrics. We'll talk about that in a bit.
He's a triple threat, I believe.
He's what they call a triple threat.
I wonder how much of the score Willie Russell actually did write.
Well, I have no idea, frankly.
If you're listening,
if we ever get him on, I guess we'll have to ask him.
I haven't seen Blood Brothers.
You're very lucky, and therefore I state my case immediately.
Now, so you're in no way, yes.
I'm not a fan.
Okay.
Tim's story is that you saw it many years ago when you were young.
Yes, I first saw it I heard the album, which is how most of us, when we're young, get to know musicals.
The
and
LP.
I got into it.
Was it an 8-track?
It was not an 8-track tape, but it was an LP, which I taped from the library. Okay. I think maybe a cassette. I can't remember. Anyway, and I went to see it at the Albury Theatre, where it was running at that time, when I was about 15, maybe 14. So that was kind of... And obviously I enjoyed that very much, and all of my, I had a couple of friends who were into it, and we
was it because it was the 80s?
Well, it wasn't quite the 80s when I was 15, but not quite that. I'm not quite that old, but
90s.
But you're not far off. Put it that way.
It had a more resonant meaning to you.
It had to do with certain political things that I was interested in at the time, but also, you're less discriminating when you're 15, when you're younger. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. Was musical theatre a newfound interest for you, so you were likely to be more impressed by No. I'd been into Phantom, and I'd been into all the sort of, the things that were current at that time by that time. But I think I was already into Gershwin and Porgy and Bess by that time, so it was just something that I had as a
the next thing along,
I think also, I suppose when you're younger, you're a bit more open-minded about what sort of is acceptable rhyming and what sort of those sorts of issues.
Yes.
So anyway, saw it, enjoyed it very much. I saw Kiki D, I think, in it. I vaguely recall. I think she was still playing it in those days.
She was Eddie, was she?
Yeah, she was Eddie, exactly. As Mrs. Johnston. And then I left it for a certain number of years, which I don't want to...
A sizable number of years, anyway. It was a significant gap, that's the point.
Yes.
And times had moved on.
Times had moved on a lot by the time we went to see it. And of course, it's now playing at the Phoenix Theatre, that's right, which is a smaller theatre, and it's now in its 20th year. I think it's now in its 21st year, I can't remember. It's about to... Of course, we've established that if Les Mis were to close tomorrow, and if Phantom were to close tomorrow, then it wouldn't be very...
happier place.
It wouldn't be very long before Blood Brothers actually took the record that Cats previously held and Les Mis currently holds of being the longest-running musical, which would be quite an interesting reason. I have heard some gossip to the effect that, in fact, it doesn't necessarily make as much money as you'd think in the Phoenix Theatre where it is.
And I can give you some gossip that Blood Brothers is closing next year.
Oh!
Is it really?
So close, so near and so far, so far.
It's so far from being good, I really don't mind.
But
I want to see something...
closing.
So look...
I want to see something in the Phoenix that's worth seeing.
So we had this... I have this experience. We returned to the Blood Brothers, and I'm
true.
thinking, I enjoyed this when I was young, and maybe I'll enjoy it again tonight. But no. I'm afraid not.
Because you went again a year ago.
We should say what it's about, really, shouldn't we? I think for anybody who doesn't know.
It's about brothers who are related.
It's the story of two twins who are separated at birth and who grow up in different social circumstances. One of them's grows up with a middle-class family. The other one grows up with a working class family and a mother who has 7 other children, I think.
Bloody hell.
That shows how common she is, and I think that unfortunately
Well,
is the level. But that's the level of sophistication it's working at. That's what I don't subscribe to.
Well,
that,
I think there is a truth to it in the sense that it's, they're Catholics.
Yes.
It's set in Liverpool, and you have the middle class. What difference does it make which class you are?
Nurture.
Nature versus nurture, if you like, which is the debate that has raged. Anyway, let's not talk about that since Rousseau. So. So it's very philosophical, yeah?
If you want it to be, yes.
There's also a fate element to that, because of course there is a superstition, and the superstition is the other major part of the theme. So that it is reputed that if twins who are raised separately ever meet, they will die at that very moment that they find out that they were raised separately.
Never heard that before.
Well, it's a popular superstition in Liverpool way.
In Willie Russell's house.
And so it's also about. So therefore, the question that is posed at the very end, in fact, is this a question of fate coming to pass, or is it what we have come to know as class?
And then she sings a nice song like Marilyn Monroe for some reason.
Well, the Marilyn Monroe. Well,
can I just go back to the point you made? It isn't just posed at the end, though, is it? There's a narrator character, an extremely cumbersome character who comes on every 12 seconds.
To make that point,
every 12 seconds.
Shoes upon the table and the spider's been killed is reprised, I think, 4 or 5 times.
And the Marilyn Monroe number, which Nick, you've just mentioned, is also mentioned far too often.
So it's a bit like Bert or Chorus. He comes on, sings
the Winds in the West
Chimney.
in Mary Poppins. Not really, no. He's a much more sinister character. I suppose if you had he has an antecedent in the MC from Cabaret, like the evil narrator, the cynical narrator. And he's not exactly like that, but that's the sort of precedent in musical theatre for someone like that.
I think he's the interpreter of what's going on for Bill Thickey, the audience.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, you see, without interrupting Tim here, I have to say I do think that it's written down very badly and treats the public as idiots.
Now, that's very interesting. I'm glad you made that point, because I was about to say we're sounding really snobby here, like 3 middle-class guys from the south of England going, oh gosh, it was just so awful. And in fact, it's true that a lot of the audience that I think it now attracts is the coach party audience. People who come from
British
all over the
tourists
country.
from the other part of the country.
Definitely more British than perhaps is the case.
And why
with
doesn't it
foreign
just
tourists.
bugger off on tours?
So I just want to be clear that we're not being contemptuous of it because it serves that kind of audience. It's just because it's not good. Yeah. That audience actually deserves better. And we'll talk about where they get better in a moment.
It treats all audiences as though they're idiots. It doesn't matter where you come from, what nationality, which part of the country. It tells you what you should be thinking and what you should be feeling all the way through.
We're burning our bridges with Willie Russell here, aren't we? Maybe
but that's also a big thing of what makes the Mega musical, which was also popular at the time. You're writing for a world audience almost.
Well,
this is the simplest form of storyline, the simplest form of characterization.
Yeah, well, in a way, at the time, of course, this was the underdog, and in many ways, I mean, again, setting aside it's the quality or otherwise of its content, a lot of people were saying, oh, you've got your Lloyd Webbers, the rich people, the people with loads of background, and you've got someone like Willie Russell who's coming up and writing Educating Rita and writing all of these plays, Our Day Out and so on, that actually are about authentic, working class experience in other parts of England, and it's not this chocolate box fantasy. It's actually something a bit gritty. So it kind of was unusual in the world of musicals in a way at that time.
It's different
certainly
in tone.
Compared to the Megas.
Certainly, I agree in tone. It's very different indeed. I just don't think it's playing the same game.
Well, obviously, nothing's gone wrong because it's still playing.
Yeah, well, in a way, commercially.
But it's very dated.
Yeah.
And perhaps tastes have moved on a bit. So, I mean, the problem is I hadn't seen it before. Unlike Tim, I had no experience of Blood Brothers before I saw it. At the beginning of this year it was, and by no means was I impressed. I immediately went straight to where Tim now is, which is that it's poorly written. I'm sorry, I think it's poorly written. I think it reprises far too often. I think it treats people very badly. I think it really labours the points it's trying to make. You should be wearing a T-shirt as you leave the theatre saying class is bad, and that is really all it's trying to say.
It doesn't say it says class inequality is bad is the sort of the message.
I don't think it's as clever as that.
Oh, okay.
I think it is class is a bad thing. It's riven our society. The end.
Was that part of what was happening in the 80s?
If you ask any socialist, it's pretty much been happening for the entire. Well, it's happening now, but
you can ask non-socialists too, and I think we'd accept there was a polarisation in society, which this spoke to at the time. But 20 years later, I think it's a different kind of polarisation.
There was a popular sort of discourse at the time, which was brought about by Thatcherism or not brought about, but it was,
the
between
political
basically
circumstances of the time.
the people at the bottom, which were the people, for example, Michael Heseltine famously made his visit down to Liverpool to talk to the people striking, and there was just seen as this massive distance between Thatcher and her cabinet of toffs mostly, and everybody else basically, and particularly people in the north.
Although, just to speak class for a second, Margaret Thatcher's government is actually considered to be the first proper middle-class Conservative government. Funnily enough, it's not considered the classy one.
That's the distance.
You can dress it up with a couple of white laws, but that's where you're going.
Blood Brothers comes out of a time when there was massive unemployment. People were really poor. Perhaps the last time, although I may be wrong in this, that it was possible to be grindingly, practically starving poor. I mean, I'm sure that's happening now, but that was the last time when there was a really widespread. Lots of people were poor. There were no pockets of wealth there, except for the middle classes. And so anyway,
there was an economic restructuring going on in the country overall, which was affecting some people extremely bad.
Very oppositional. People felt that the working class were up against the government. And class was up against class, as it were.
You also have to remember that the previous Conservative government, which fell in '74, fell directly as a result of organised labour striking.
So anyway, that's the political...
Sorry to butt in for a second. But,
with songs!
So you saw the show. Are there real instruments in the orchestra?
Didn't actually look in the pit, so I don't know how much of
I don't remember remarking on there not being, but that doesn't mean anything.
Because I heard the CD...
It's a small band anyway.
I mean, I heard the CD and I thought if I hear one more synthesised drum, I think I'm going to slip my throat.
There are definitely synthesised drums in the track. It's actually... I mean, it's written for a small and
unpretentious band.
And the Phoenix is quite a small theatre anyway.
Yeah. I don't think... I agree, the score hadn't really been updated as far as I can tell since... I may be wrong at that, but just from...
is there a sort of blatant attempt to write a modern pop song for the time, and now we would see it today and think, this sounds a bit 80s, they should try and redo this?
Yes.
Not sure many songs have actually come out of it into the popular world.
No, I think... Was there not a single of Tell Me It's Not True?
Tell Me It's Not True is the only one that really goes anywhere, and apparently... Barbara Dixon and Petula Clark have all sung it at their concerts, but I think that's actually playing to a cult market rather than actually going...
Though. It's one I'll happily download illegally and listen to.
Well,
you heard it here first, officer.
I mean, off iTunes and pay 79p for it.
Of course you would. I think... I mean, actually, I don't strongly object to the music. I find the music quite memorable. I mean, maybe this is just me because I just listened to it a lot when I was young, but I do find some of the tunes quite... I mean, for example, there's one that, yes, I think they work. There's one called, it's either called That Guy or My Child or...
they haven't decided yet.
Well, no, but it occurs 3 times. So it comes up first as My Child, which is sung by Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Lyons. And then you have My Friend, which is Mickey and Eddie sing it. And then it's a duet.
And then it finishes off with, my God, when's this going to end?
And then That Guy. And so it's just this constant different perspective song, and it's got a very lovely da-da-da-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-da-dum-da-da. And it's just very charming, very naive, very, it's a sweet tune. And I think it's very engaging for that reason.
Lyrics.
Really. Marilyn Monroe goes up 3 times as well, by the way.
Let's talk about lyrics, goodness. Well, look.
Pop lyrics.
First of all, First of all, if you have a thing, as I'm afraid I do, and I think we all do really, about false rhymes, then clearly there's quite a few moments where you go...
Foss said on the forums that they have lots of pop rhymes in this show.
Yeah. Yes, and pop rhyme is the term I'd use. They work, if you took them out of context, and if you could make them into a pop hit, probably no one would bat an eyelid. But in musical theatre, sitting in the theatre, I expect someone to put a bit more work in.
Now, okay, if you might equally argue...
Why? But surely a lyricist is a lyricist, and they should put work in whatever song they're doing.
But that's not true. Doctor's not... What do you mean by a lyricist is a lyricist?
If you're writing a pop song, you should put the same amount of effort in as you're writing a musical theatre song.
Oh, yes, I'd love to see that, but I've given up the ghost... I've given up the fight for pop music. I'm still happy to wage the one for musical theatre.
I think that fight in
in fairness, I think some pop writers might consider it the opposite way around. But anyway...
They may.
Yeah. But because a lot of musical theatre uses tropes and cliches and stuff like that.
I'm not saying it's perfect by any means. The lyrics made me cringe.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about them not being sophisticated. They are very basic. Mm-hmm. They repeat and dredge and change, and you get a few variants.
I mean, the first 2 lines is, once I had a husband, the sort of chap. I met him at a dance and how he came on with the chat. Yeah. So, it's kind of...
The A is rhyming. Yeah. I'm being the devil's advocate here, and I think...
Well, I think that, there is a case, because I'm, as you know, I've we'll be talking in some episode sometime about the hip-hop musical, and the fact is those standards aren't the same in hip-hop. There are standards, but they're different standards, and it's not about rhyming, it's about assonating, and it's about,
So
doing
what
those things.
standards do you think Willie achieved in Blood Brothers?
Well, this is where you really can make the point, because in a way, I think he does stuff that sounds like pop, and I think the standards aren't high. If I'm honest,
But it's not
about emotion.
But it's not even contemporaneous pop, though. It's all very retro. It all feels very 50s and 60s to me.
Yeah, some of that's deliberate because, of course, you're talking about Marilyn Monroe and
Her
it's
past,
nostalgic.
yes.
But yeah, you're right. And there's some bits of pastiche, like in the second Marilyn Monroe and the second act Marilyn Monroe.
What's the scenography like?
All the scenography.
Yes.
Well, again, it was a brave at the time. It was an innovative thing to do. They took, instead of having like all big, the cliche West End musical at that time was like things that moved around and were on lifts and doing stuff like that. And it's a much more straightforward staging. It's on one side you've got the
You've thoroughly convinced me not to go.
Oh well, okay, fine. But I mean, if you want everything to move, then no, you're definitely right. It's not the show for you. On one side, you have. I find myself slightly in the position of being its
Caught in the middle.
sole defender here, actually, at the moment, because it's.
But you don't actually much like it, do you?
There are things that I do like, and I liked at the time about it. So I feel I should
that's fine.
give it credit where it's due. On one side, you have the whole thing is surrounded by it's mainly brickwork, and you can see the poor houses on one side and the rich houses on the other, I'm afraid. And it does sound a little crude as I explain it now. And so you get that sense of being somewhere which is down at heel, and it's not intended to be somewhere which is kind of, in a way, it's not trying to say you spent £50 on a ticket, so here is your £50 demonstrated for you. It tries to say this is a world that maybe you do live in, but here is a world that you recognise. Here is a world that you can see around you every day. And in terms of how that sort of all of the staging is put together, I mean, they use that set very economically. They do change it for the second act because they move house, and you start to see that. And they bring in. There's a few few little flying things that just pop in to make the scene of the middle class house of the Lions.
No
household.
illusions then.
No illusions, and no.
Speaking of that, if you were expecting to have an interview this week with Paul Kiev, that's been put off due to scheduling difficulties, but that will be back.
There are leaves on the line.
Yes, the wrong kind of leaves.
That's odd, because I thought it was due to scheduling difficulties, isn't it?
Whatever, depends what country you're
How
from.
odd.
Schedule?
Which country do you come from?
Let's call the whole thing off, as we did, in fact. So, yeah. So I think those were.
There's nothing wrong with this.
That's next
interesting
week,
things.
interview, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't fault Blood Brothers on its set.
No.
Right.
That's not the reason you might object to it. I suppose so. We
just
we
a
haven't
text.
really yet analysed what it is about the script or the book that we think fails.
Trite.
Yeah.
It's very contrived.
Yeah.
Very, very. Sorry, I don't think I've stressed this enough. It's very, very.
Very.
Yes. Very contrived with squared.
Yeah. It does definitely make it to point.
Separated brothers taken into different classes and yet meet regularly, become friends, get separated, meet again, separate.
There's lots of coincidence and there's lots of.
Is it one of your pet peeves, Thos, a Poe-faced musical?
I don't like Poe-faced musicals. It's certainly true,
without,
but that's
it's not without humour.
It isn't without humour. It has a kind of earthy humour. But what I object to actually is badly written musicals. I'm so sorry. It's all I can say.
A lot of the humour is folksy and is quite. It attempts to charm. Now, for example, the cast we saw.
Mickey is the working class boy, and Eddie is the middle class boy, for want of character definitions.
Are they? Yeah, but yes.
Well,
Jay
right.
Roberts played Mickey. Jay Roberts is about, I would guess, 22. I'm not sure. He's very young.
And his twin
And
identical
his
brother
identical twin was played. Eddie was played by Mark Hutchinson, who had played it some years previously, that part, and has returned to it.
Or when you saw it first?
Well, I don't know if it was that long ago, but certainly he has played it before.
They had trouble
and they
bridging that
don't
age
really
gap.
look that similar. Is part of the problem. And
Well, that's because of the Zimmer frame.
oh, so cruel. And I apologise on your behalf
Yes.
to.
I also apologise.
To Mark Hutchinson.
No, he played it very well, but the problem
it was great performances. Both
very
of them.
difficult to suspend disbelief.
But not. Yeah,
But that's not his
exactly.
fault, in fairness.
No, it's not.
No.
It's a casting decision.
Yeah.
So we had those two things going on, and again, because, as you say, because it relies on a lot of coincidence, and the way that they get separated is that the working class mother, is going to have twins, Mrs. Johnson, and then suddenly Mrs. Lyons gets the idea of give one to me, and she has to go around with a pillow up her,
Yes.
up her dress. I was going to say, and
To pretend she's pregnant.
and you just suddenly think, did nobody call on a
Mr.
gynecologist
Lyons?
or an obstetrician or whatever? Was there?
Darling,
What was
he
the
said
audience
Mr. Lyons in bed one night.
Well, in fact, he's away on business, isn't
Yes,
he?
yes,
Supposedly
yes.
for the whole 9 months.
Also means
But don't you ask which hospital did you have it in? I mean,
What was the audience reaction the second time you went?
Actually, it was a mixture, because I think some people, we certainly had a bit of a titter at certain moments where the elastic of the plot was stretched just that bit too thin.
But come the end, was
and other people did as well. It wasn't
yes.
just us.
Oh no, it wasn't just us. But a night out of theatre is a night out of the theatre, and for a lot of people, that in itself is a great evening, and why not?
Yeah.
And so there were an awful lot of people who were obviously enjoying it. There were a lot of female hen nights.
Well, I don't know if it was hen nights, but yeah, certainly there were a lot of groups together of quite a lot of women. They certainly weren't drunk. They were behaving.
They were driven to it by the end.
They were appreciative, and there were audiences who were appreciative. Probably for the same reason as I was when I was 15, in the sense that they'd listen to the album, they know it very well, and that's enjoyable in itself.
And there's something that Willie Russell can't be held responsible, which is the fact that it's now 20 years later.
Yeah.
At the time it was written,
it was never updated.
Yeah, the late 80s. It had a certain resonance with what was going on in the 80s. We've discussed that. That's perfectly reasonable. As we went through the 90s and then well into the next decade, I haven't yet come... Well, yes, whatever you want to call it. The Edwardian era plus 100. It feels very out of date. It's, Thatcherite policies, attitudes have all been swept away. All right, here we go.
But we've got a segue there, haven't we? Because, of course, Billy Elliot, which...
Can I just want to touch upon the ending here briefly, because I think the ending is a fine example of how contrived it all was.
Is there a twist?
Well, you could call it that.
Well, no, there isn't, because the play starts off with both sons. The play starts off with both sons dead.
Okay.
So you know where it's going all the way through.
Who did it?
Well,
the suspense is, how is it going to get to that situation?
Yeah, with the narrator really cranking it up at every level. Not the suspense, just the... just
by the way, this is exciting, ladies and gentlemen.
Please, come back, he shouted in rhyme.
Everything he says is in rhyming verse, in strophic verse, isn't it?
Just about.
It's specifically that rhythm.
Why hasn't Willie Russell written another musical?
I think this speaks for itself.
But it's a hit.
I think here's your answer. Well, that's true, actually. And I'm not sure. Well, now my lack of homework is showing, because I'm not sure if he didn't write another musical.
I'm going to be honest. He's a
playwright. Will it be like Lloyd Webber, and he'll never have a hit this big again?
Well, I think now it's getting pretty clear.
His era's gone. He's an 80s writer. He was a playwright, and he was a good playwright.
Yeah.
I just don't think he's a musical
playwright. But he'll
be
remembered for this.
No, I think
remember
for Education Rita, I should think.
And for Shirley Valentine.
Oh, yes, of course.
Unquestionably.
But go on, Thos, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, the ending here is that Eddie, the posh one, ends up on the council, where Mickey becomes unemployed and becomes depressed and is in a miserable circle. And he gets really uptight with anger and goes to the council chamber, where, in a fit of accident, we don't know, he shoots his brother Eddie, and at the same time the police who have been called then shoot Mickey. So they die instantaneously, which is the point that Tim made earlier. Just as everyone they know is in the room at the same time. So the Lyonses are there, Mother's turned up.
Yes.
There's a shower
at a council meeting, as you would.
Everyone goes to the council meetings, don't they?
Yeah.
It's like the opening to My Favourite Year, when everyone just has to be in that scene at the same time.
Yeah, but My Favourite Year is a comedy. That just about works, you see. I can tell you what, I work for a council, ladies and gentlemen, and they don't bring in in coach troops.
There's always that problem as well, when you have a gun fired in a thing. What happens always, or if you have anything which is a shock, like in The Woman in Black, for example, suffers from this as well. Suddenly you have this bang or this scream or whatever it is. Then suddenly the audience then spend the next 2 minutes laughing at themselves for having jumped at it.
Yes, it's a natural reaction. You laugh at
and
shock.
Unfortunately, it comes at a moment in the show which doesn't really want that to be going on for the audience.
But what's interesting is that's the plot, and then Mother comes in and has a good old weep. And then class is blamed, and everyone goes home happy. But in the script book, apparently, there's an alternative ending in which Mrs. Lyons, that's the mother, the surrogate mother, if you like, or the adoptive mother of Eddie, bursts in and shoots both brothers. I don't know what reason's given. She
becomes mentally ill, doesn't she?
She does.
For the later stages, and I assume he was trying to work.
That's class. Class did that. Oh. Bad class, naughty class.
Well, a touch of class.
I'm going to my room now, said Class.
Yes.
I completely forgot to ask, this did play in America?
Yes, it did, surprisingly. We think it's possibly not the kind of thing that would naturally travel. You certainly wouldn't think so.
No.
But it did play Broadway, opening in 93, so it took 5 years or so to get there. But with Petula Clark, an internationally renowned British singer.
Yes.
Played downtown then, obviously.
And she stayed for nearly a year, very good, by the way. And then she then went into the US touring company, so it went round America. She did another 6 months or so, about 9 months.
You wonder what they made of that, don't you? I suppose there would be. I suppose actually, outside of New York, it might have played better, because there are certain things that are fairly universal.
Well, America doesn't have class, does it?
Oh, yes, it does. They may say that
It
they don't.
certainly
But
does.
Yes, they do.
They don't have
Feedback
it. They
at
don't.
Musical Talk.
It's more money based there.
They don't have it. They don't. It's not recognised or as official or based around snobbery. Actually, is here because it's all about who puts the milk in first. Sometimes here, isn't it? Or that the way that it's commonly
Yes,
talked
but if you
about.
can trace your family back to the Pilgrim Fathers, you're doing very well.
Yeah.
What,
there's a lot of
after all,
that.
is a wasp.
Yeah.
There's an international cast album with Petula Clark and David and Sean Cassidy playing the brothers.
Wow.
And Willie Russell himself plays the role of the narrator. And we're all laughing at this end. I blame class. Again. Class is responsible for all decisions in the world which are bad.
No.
Oh, alcohol.
I think just as a final word, and we ought to say that Forbidden Broadway have done a spoof.
Forbidden Broadway.
They have done a spoof of it called Mug Brothers, which I think possibly tells you everything you need to know about this particular musical. Next.
We are going to play a game
Yes.
for Thos and Tim. I love being a presenter of this show because I never have to do anything.
You wait.
I'm going to read out some song titles, and you are going to try and give me... Why are you laughing?
Because I'm not going to be able to know any of these. I'm sure Thos is going to lead on this.
Not
one.
necessarily.
You have to sort of do it alternately.
Can we confer?
Thos,
Yeah, we must work together.
we only
on
have a
this.
minute. And
Okay. Well, can I just make a prediction to avoid a total abject humiliation? I don't think I'm going to get any of these.
We made it.
And my prediction is Tim's right.
We'll see. You have 1 minute, and if you can give me the year, that'll be brownie points.
Yeah, I remember what comes before
This
a
is
fall.
totally not fake, listeners, and I wish it were.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
going
not
to-
just summer that comes before a fall; it's pride as well. Carry
Yes.
on.
I'm going to. I'll buy you a glass of water, and we go out for later if you win. Whoever wins. In fact,
All
I've
right.
given you a glass of water already. So let's-
And presumably you'll pass some water for whoever loses.
ready?
With one look.
Where's that song from? Here we go. Manhattan.
Well, it's Rodgers and Hart.
Yes.
But it's not Connecticut Yankee in the court of laughter. Is it? It's not Jumbo. No, don't know.
Okay. Someone to watch over me.
Gershwin.
That's okay, isn't
Yes. Well done.
Very good. So you got one.
it? There's
you
one I know.
Manhattan Greenery.
I don't know that
Manhattan
at all.
Green. We were talking about Mountain Greenery.
I
of
hope I
course.
told you the answer probably. Manhattan is from Garrick Gaieties.
Right, okay. It's an early Rodgers and Hart.
Mountain Greenery is from The Girlfriend.
Oh, did you say Mountain Greenery?
Yes.
Oh, you said Manhattan Greenery originally.
Did I?
Yes. Didn't
How
he,
could we-
listeners?
How could we possibly know that? You'd have known that as well.
How long has this been going on?
Gershwin again?
Although there's another song that
Usually
uses
big.
the same lyric. Oh, okay. All right.
Oh, right. Which one
Well,
are you
it's quite
talking
a
about?
it's quite a popular standard because in Caroline O'Change there's a How Long Has This Been Going On segment.
Yes, it's definitely Gershwin. Is it? Okay, I didn't answer any of them, and Tim got them, so there we are.
There we go.
Tim got it,
Tim is
and
a
I didn't.
winner. Rosalie from 1928.
Give us some more. I'm
Rosalie,
enjoying this
funnily
now.
enough, is not a musical by Gershwin per se. They have Gershwin numbers stuck in it. Rosalie is the song.
Trust you to
Rose.
know that.
What? I think it's Sigmund Romberg with Gershwin numbers stuck in.
Oh, so it's a jukebox musical.
In effect.
No. It was written at the time. It's written for contemporaneous.
This is his show that they just sort of...
Sigmund Romberg wrote a show called Rosalie, and Gershwin had some numbers in it.
Okay.
Things were more fluid in those days.
Should we make it a 2-minute game? Let's go. Okay,
Gosh,
here
this
we
is
go.
fun, listener. Do join in.
Love me,
When is it your turn?
love me or leave me.
No idea.
Oh, you see, I didn't even know that was from a show. Oh, hang on a minute, though. It's not. I think it's by Johnny Mercer, and I think it's not Blues of a Night, is it?
No,
Okay,
you're correct. It's not.
excellent. Point to me then.
From Whoopi, 1928.
Oh, really? So it's not. I was completely wrong in the attribution.
Here's one.
Who wrote it, ladies?
I Got Rhythm.
Gershwin again.
Yes.
What's that from?
That's. Oh God, it's.
It's not Porgy and Bess. I know that.
I Got Rhythm. Well, it's been in An American in Paris, but it wasn't written for An American in Paris.
Nope.
Go on then.
Girl Crazy from
Okay.
1930. Just one of those things.
One of those crazy things.
That's Cole Porter. That's. Well, it's not High Society, is it?
I think it's a good. I like the way you say it's not this and it's not that. At least you kind of.
You see, I can do the composers.
You know what shows they're not from? Which
What
is
was it?
very
From,
good.
what was it from?
That is from.
It's not from
Jubilee.
Phantom of the Opera.
Jubilee.
Jubilee from
Right.
1935. See,
Splendid.
a good book. This. It's called Musicals, Facts, Figures, and Fun.
Is that the one that's going out of the
It wasn't
window
much
now?
fun for us.
Yes. I feel completely.
Come on then, Nick. Hand over this
I
book.
feel like a
I don't know
charlatan.
any of them.
Let's just see if we can test a few
You can
out.
do the next quiz.
Yes.
What's Sailing from, Nick?
That's from Tonight's the Night, the Rod Stewart
Oh,
musical.
okay. Well, there's also a Sailing in the New Brain by William Finn. So we'll have to see.
Oh, yes, you mentioned that.
Yes.
That shows my taste, or lack of. Billy Elliot, another British musical
set in the Thatcher era?
Possibly, it's unique.
It's
the only musical I think I've ever seen where it's opened with a picture of Herbert Morrison, who was a 1940s cabinet minister here in Britain, ladies and gentlemen, and was the man responsible.
50s, I think, as well.
He was Foreign Secretary in 1951. Yes, you're right, but not for long.
See, if you'd asked us cabinet ministers, we'd have been fine.
Yes.
Instead of song titles.
Well, he was leader of the House of Commons until 1951.
Oh, okay, very good.
Can we talk?
And it all ties in with one of the last songs, actually, from Billy Elliot.
Yeah.
Billy Elliot. The opening is a projection on a cyc of Herbert Morrison, who, although he was leader of the House of Commons, was also responsible for the nationalisation programme of the Labour government of 1945, who nationalised the mines. And from then on, the miners had a massively important role in British politics up until it was destroyed in 1984, which is what's called generally the miners' strike in this country. And that is the political background for Billy Elliot. Discuss.
Yeah.
Probably loads of people have seen the film with Jamie Bell.
Yes, and which in a way plays that aspect slightly less explicitly, doesn't it? I think the political aspect is actually brought further out, interestingly, in this show. Well, I mean, it's there, but I mean, I think in Billy Elliot, you have to just be vaguely aware there's a conflict going on. And I think here it's made much more explicit. Obviously, famously, "Merry Christmas, Maggie Thatcher" is one of the songs.
They could do it because it's a British audience singing it, so they didn't have to really confuse the world.
Well, of course, not just a British audience though, because
it's opening in Australia in a couple of weeks.
And famously, of course, as Matt Fraser said to us the other week, Barbara Streisand came and insisted that all her company come and see it. Admittedly, I'm sure she's not the only, and I'm sure she's not the only American who's seen it.
It's opening on Broadway.
There you go.
And the Americans love it.
Well, indeed, it has to be said that the night I went to see it, which was last week, a young fellow called Corey Snide was playing the Billy Elliot role and was fantastic, unidentifiable as an American. He'd picked up the accent really quite incredibly.
Now, can anyone in here do the accent, which we have?
I can't.
The Geordie accent.
Tim can't.
Not very well. No.
How about you, Nick? The man of a million voices.
Well, there's a
uncanny.
There's always a funny bit to which made me laugh. What are you doing, man, woman, man?
What are you doing, man, woman, man?
Man, woman.
Because they say
man
happen?
at the end of everything.
You'll be laughing to your sen.
What are you doing, woman, was the actual phrase.
Oh, I see. What you doing, woman, man? Yeah.
Man, woman, man.
Taking us back to the point about the miners' strike, I think Tim's right. It's played out very much more than in the film, but it's still the secondary story because there are two stories going on. There's the miners' strike story, and then there's Billiot's journey of Billiot.
It's the short version.
Elliot.
He's a Billy Elliot, yes. And then there's his story, which of course is the foreground. And the two, although they intertwine, they also keep very, very separate. The style of music for the two stories is quite different.
Yeah.
You've got all the political stuff is heavier and slightly more contemporary, at least in tone. By which I mean 80s contemporary. It sounds like it's pop music of the time. There's synthesizers. Whereas all the Billy songs, or most of the Billy songs, are in fact show business. They're all music.
Apart from the pop songs, Electricity.
Well, I want to talk about Electricity on a different front again in a minute, but I mean it's arguable, but fine. But there's the theatre trend, if you like, the musical theatre trend of songs, and then there's
that's more
political
the transsexual friend, isn't it?
No, he's only got.
As fair as transvestite, I think is the word you're searching for. But yes,
Shine is very showbiz. That doesn't feature him. Shine is the number where Mrs. Wilkinson, the dance teacher, is getting her girls to dance while Billy is waiting to hand back the keys.
I do lie. I do actually have the CD. I paid a large expenditure of £7.99 to get it off iTunes, and
Your Honour,
I enjoy it. I enjoy it when I listen to it, but I like the show. I can't.
The show is better than the score. I'm going to say that now.
I can't go back to the song listing and think, "Oh, I like that one. I'll listen to it."
Well,
if you see what I mean.
Can I just very quickly run through the songs, if it's useful? The opening number is called
performance.
The Stars Look Down. That's the miners deciding to go on strike, and that sets up the political background, and it's the opening number. Then the next song is called Shine, which is a complete different one. That's the one I say Mrs. Wilkinson's teaching the schools, and it's very musical theatre because she's really doing it for herself.
Were the riffs stolen from of course.
Oh, you mean the da 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 da? Well, I mean that's a fairly. But the reason it is what it is in one is precisely because
it's now a meme or a trope, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's got a great lyric. It doesn't matter if you're unemployed, only partially humanoid, an octopoid whose mind's a void. And then later on, well, I say a great lyric, but it's quite funny at the time. It doesn't matter if you're special needs, maimed or lame, or born in Leeds. They love to hear a heart that bleeds. All you really got to do is shine.
I couldn't hear many of the lyrics.
Could you not? They were helpful.
That trouble. I was close to the back as well.
I paid
we had
for the
good seats when I saw it, and
but luckily they're in the program.
They are in the program.
And there are some rude words in it, which...
There's an awful lot of bad language, which most of the children are given.
Yeah, which is great.
I love this country.
But no, yeah, it's totally appropriate because, and one of the ways, that's one of the things that in the film as well, that, that gives the kids a certain degree of authenticity. And it actually, as you say, it removes, well, you didn't say, but I'm about to say that it removes some of the...
Well, I would have done, Tim, because I agree with you. Whatever it is you're going to say.
There's a lot of risk in this of over-cutesifying the whole children's story, the story of the three main children that you get to sort of know in it. And of course, they need to be given a rough edge in order for for them to not be too over sentimentalized. I mean, I think this is quite sentimental, but
the third child being the girlfriend,
that's
if you
right,
like,
yes.
the daughter of Mrs. Wilkinson.
Show you my fanny.
Yes, but she's
If you
actually
like.
very
No, you're
much.
all right.
Yeah. But what's interesting is actually I don't think in the stage version her role is properly fleshed out. She comes in and does what she needs to do for the purposes of the plot.
Same.
Yes, I think that's fair.
It should be a fanny song.
Yes, we'd like to point once again for the American listeners, it means something different in Britain and it's slightly ruder here.
yes.
It's your front bum as opposed to your back bum.
Well, there we are. That
But only if
puts
you're
it
a
about as
lady.
explicitly as I could possibly want.
Also,
Or not.
it escapes the confines of the film. Actually, I think it's much bigger, much better than the film, and it's.
Okay.
Oh,
that's
yeah, well,
very
Would the
interesting
show
to say.
work without the film to support it?
It's you see, I think it's the film is brilliant. The film is absolutely unequivocally a very good film, moving, clever, intelligent, and the musical doesn't follow the linear story. It's so many.
We have the ballet in the middle as opposed to at the end.
But it's more than
disappointed
it
a lot of
uses
people.
it uses theatrical tradition to break away from the linear storytelling of film. So, for example, if you went to see recently the My Fair Lady, which was revived in London at Drury Lane, you'd have enjoyed it. But what you'd have been seeing was a live version of the film with only one scene that was different, which is the I'm Getting Married in the Morning scene, which was set in a pub rather than in the streets. But that was the only thing that was different. Everything else was carbon copy. This is not a carbon copy of the film. It is much cleverer. It's Stephen Daldry, who directed again, has very cleverly said, I'm not using any of the film concepts. I'm going to use...
We're going to do some
Except for, I might add the choreography, which we'll talk about in a bit.
All right. And also, actually, in fairness, there's incidental music in scene changes. So it does use some of the concepts of film to tell its story. But essentially, it's not linear. There's a lovely scene called Solidarity. It's a song where the policemen and the miners are having a riot and they're marching backwards and forwards across the stage. At the same time, in the middle of the stage, the dance class is going on with the little girls.
Yeah, that's
so
really
it's
nice.
all going on at the same time.
And the
It's very-
policemen have tutus on, I think. But that
Only momentarily. But, that's what
that
they
was
do in
the
their
best
private
scene.
lives. Entirely up to them.
I think that was the best scene in the show.
The grandmother is also fleshed out rather more in the stage version, I think, than she is in the film, and much better for it. It was
She has a lot of people's favourite song, the grandmother's
which is
song.
We'd Go Dancing.
Yeah.
Which is, funny enough, there's a song which is very similar to that, isn't there? Which is the Marilyn Monroe number, I think, in Blood Brothers. The mother is always banging on about how she likes to go dancing. And I'm sure,
yes,
isn't there a
that's
lyric
true.
about We'd Go Dancing?
Yes.
So, in a way, I'd say, once again, a similarity, but in no way is it a major similarity. Because the We'd Go Dancing, which is where the grandmother remembers her miserable life but goes dancing with her violent husband, and for 2 minutes there's somebody else
The
until
only
they
time she-
until they wake up sober the next morning. We were free for an hour or three from the people we had to be, is the lyric. And it's quite inspiring, but it's also catalytic for Billy, because it's when Billy has it shown to him that dancing is an escape. So it's actually a first and significant plot point.
We could actually talk about some of the underlying themes, because the American dream, is the most pervasive trope you ever get in musicals, and it's about
culture, in fact.
individuals through their own talents rising above their
Individuality.
Exactly, and rising above, where they're the lot they're given in
And that's
life
one of
and
the
having
seven
success.
stories, though. I mean, that's not just something which.
Well, no, it's not just. It's. I think you're right. It's not just an American story, but it's. Often the trope of.
Chase Your Dream is...
It's not always there.
Well, is your Chase Your Dream an American ideal or everyone's ideal?
Well, all right, maybe it is.
it's
but,
just sometimes dressed up in an American
It's
ideal.
very
We see it a lot.
closely associated with the structure, the classic sort of American.
We'll do an
musical.
episode on the American Dream. I think.
Another time.
But
yeah.
it does tie in actually with the political context we were talking about, because Margaret Thatcher famously said in the 1980s there's no such thing as society, and the miners are all singing a song called Solidarity, and indeed, which of course in its own term is a left-wing term if you think about the Polish trade union movement and freedom.
Which I
But
do every day,
it's what I'm trying to say is there's a kind of solidarity, we stick together, we can win, blah, 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 and that fails. They don't win the miners' strike.
Yeah.
And indeed, the last number, it's not actually called that, it's the call down, but it's called Individuality, which ultimately is the Thatcherite ideal as well, funny enough.
Yes.
So you could argue that it's
Did Elton John
a Thatcherite parable.
Did Elton John do quite well in the 80s then? I suppose he did.
He did do jolly well.
Wonder who he voted for.
period in the 80s, isn't it?
No, he did I'm Still Standing.
Oh, yeah.
and
It was a boom
Natashka or
time for
Natushka
him.
or whatever it's called.
Nikita.
You remember- Nikita,
You're
yes.
thinking of Babushka.
Yes, I
Do you
am.
think that's why he did the score? Because he
No, he was
do-
asked.
He he can do 80s style music, which is something a lot of people
I'm sure that's one reason. I mean, I can't remember the exact story, but he met somebody at a party, didn't he? And he said he was so inspired by it, he'd love to do a musical. And
Can you tell that he wrote it
a
in
musical
3 weeks?
ensued.
Yes.
Yes.
Next
Why?
question.
Why?
I think there's one song, indeed Tim and I both agree on. There's one song we both think fails, which is where father is talking to militant mining son, and it's called He Could Be a Star. It's where they're arguing over whether they can support Billy's future.
Is this at the audition?
It's before.
It's the point at which the father has made the decision to become a scab and is going back to work and
to
then
fund Billy's
exactly. And the
chance.
son, of course, who's slightly is even more political, if that's possible, than the father about it. He challenges him, and the son has to persuade Billy Elliot's brother has to. Oh no, hang on. Which way is it going? Yeah.
In that one, the son marches out, doesn't he? They're about to have a fight or get very close to having a fight.
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
But I tell you what, I think the song doesn't work well. It's that it should be a highly charged emotional moment. It's father and eldest son having a big argument over younger son's future, and can you give up a way of life to support that? Give up what
He says, "You'll make us all a scab, Dad. You'll humiliate us all. Don't do this to me, Dad, or to him." And then the dad's next line is, "He could be a star for all we know. We don't know how far he could go, and no one else can give what I can give, and no one else can give what I can give." And he could go and he could shine, just stay here, not just stay here counting time.
You say the word shine again, which is clever.
Yeah.
But the point, I think, is the fact that should be a highly charged emotional moment, and in fact it's just two men shouting at each other in a dark room. I'm sad to say.
Well, my problem with it is not so much that, actually. I can believe
shouty.
in two men shouting at each other because that happens a lot in the film and for the same reason. But it's just that the language is just not totally plausible. The father character you don't see is going to think about things in terms of my son could be a star. He could be a star.
Yes, you're right. It's not.
Elton John might feel that way. I just don't think the dad would.
Get yourself a trade son.
But we should actually. But this is very unfair. We should definitely concentrate on the many things that do work in this.
Oh yes, that's the only song I think that doesn't work. Lee Hall has done a really good set of lyrics, I think, for the whole thing on the whole.
And book.
Yes, indeed.
There are some very.
And he wrote the original film, of course.
Indeed, of course. Once
territory.
you've got things like "Once we were kings," once we built visions on the ground we hewed, which is just a brilliant line. It says,
although, brother, can you spare a dime? It's very similar to that.
Right.
In that
Okay.
sense. But once I built a railroad, made it run on time, made the trains run on time.
All the lyrics.
Yeah, but that's less poetic, isn't it?
It
That's
is,
kind of more practical, and this is more sort of it tries to draw the
heart out of it.
All the lyrics sound very. I mean, all these kind of hymnal stuff sound very much like the sort of poets of the 18th century. Sort of talking about. Do you see what I mean?
You mean Blake or?
Well, I say Wesley. Actually, I think they're more Wesleyan hymns. Actually,
it's more poetic than lyrical.
The song that Tim's just mentioned, which is the one at the
you've got Over Vales and Hills, if that gives you a clue.
Once We Were Kings is done very much in the style, actually, of a Welsh miners' chorus, which is also tied in with the Presbyterian religious
Now, that was the best bit of the show, the end, was when they were singing this song and the orchestra cut out and it was just...
It's a cappella, isn't it? It's a choir.
Lowering down into the floor.
Yeah, this is
and that's figurative as well as literal, isn't it? They're going back into the mine, but they're also going down because that's the end of the profession.
Yeah. Basically.
And they've got Davy lamps, and all the lights are cut, or very nearly. They've got the house lights, or not the house lights, the stage lights go down, and they've got Davy lamps.
Brilliant moment.
It is. It's very.
The ending, I thought was a bit weak after that because it was just Billy running off to the audience to sort of go and be a
swan in Matthew Bourne's ballet, because what happens in the
film. But you'd already had the elder Billy have a dance with younger Billy.
I didn't understand that ballet thing at all. I didn't really get what it was.
I thought that was rather good.
Or something.
Let me just see what I wrote about that. Sorry.
Ross and Tim have bought books and videos and scores.
I took notes all the way through, I have to say. The dance scene doesn't have a title as far as I can see. It's Synchronised Young and Old Billy ballet scene. Using music from Swan Lake, not specially composed music instead, to absolutely hammer home that this is him in the future or potentially
it's actually
him in the
Dying
future.
Swan, isn't it? I think is the actual piece. I may be wrong about that, but it certainly is in the film.
Yeah. It's that one. I can't remember you seeing it, Phil.
Yes, but I'm not able to spot Tchaikovsky from 30 Paces necessarily.
He's dead.
Very simple staging, because they had to start off with them doing synchronised things with chairs.
Yeah.
And then young Billy takes the female role, actually, because he's put on a Kirby wire and is flung around the elder Billy's head. And then the song actually ends with...
You make that sound so romantic.
There is flying, ladies and gentlemen, in this show.
And And it ends with Billy, because if it's all being watched by the father, this is where the father, it's the scene that precedes He Could Be a Star, it's where the father suddenly realises that Billy might have a talent, and Billy ends up defiantly facing his father. He'd already been defiant at the end of Act 1, if you remember, where he does that stunning end of Act 1, actually, where Billy does his I'm Really Angry dance. It's stunning in the film, and it's absolutely stunning on the stage again, where he just, angrily dancing. Well, it's such a clever thing.
This whole thing of you see something on film, and you're like, okay, well, they've filmed that for 10 years, and it's all cut together very nicely and stuff, but when you see it on stage, you think,
the whole routine is there.
Been practiced and I got my money's worth.
There's one slightly odd thing about the song Electricity, which is the song in the audition, where Billy's explaining what it is he feels when he's dancing, is the fact that, very oddly, in the film, he just says, I feel like electricity. And he's actually proven what he feels like and what he can do through the dance, which, of course, is the passion. In this, it's all done through lyrics. Bizarrely, bearing in mind the whole thing is about his ability as a dancer and his ability to express himself through dance, the song where he actually has to express himself, and bearing in mind he's a relatively tongue-tied boy, tongue-tied as well, it's curious that the words, it's the lyrics in Electricity which get his story across, rather than the feeling of the music or any dance.
That reminded me of Chorus Line a bit, because you had the people off, you had the audition leaders off stage, just voices over the speaker system.
Well, of course, there's about 3 different numbers in that point in Chorus Line, where Cassie, Let Me Dance For You, I'm a Dancer, The Music in the Mirror, all these various versions of it.
You had one person on stage expressing their feelings about their art form.
Yes.
Which...
Yes, it's interesting. It's very obvious why that had to be musicalised and why that had to be a song in that particular moment, because it's just so. It's probably one of the most significant moments, and therefore not to have a song there would seem deeply perverse. But I agree with you. It's kind of it really comes out. I think. The high points for me were the choreographed routines, and specifically the angry routine.
But they say it all depends which boy you get.
Well, I don't.
Some boys better at singing. Some boys.
Okay, well that may be true. The night I saw it, certainly he was pretty good at everything, really.
So was mine.
Yeah, so
I'd love to go and see it again.
Then we shall.
Yeah.
But can I ask you, Tim? Because earlier on you said you wanted to talk about the connection with the choreography with the film. What exactly was it you were going to say?
Well, there are a lot of moves. I'm not a dance expert, and I haven't sat there and compared the two sides. But I didn't take my DVD player along to the theatre. But there are a lot of moves that are very recognisable from the sequences in the film, specifically in that angry. I think doesn't it start with him? He's flicking V signs and he's tapping on in the film.
It's a corrugated shed, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But in this case, I think it's up on the tower that comes up. An awful lot of that. I thought, I recognise that move, and I think it doesn't quite end in quite the same way. But it is it's that strong tap routine. And, he's throwing himself at things and bashing off walls.
It's when you get dance with passion. It's the first time you see the connection of passion with dance. He's been able to dance because he's technically quite good. In fact, they play on the technical part previously in Act 1 where he can do the spin. In fact, it's in the same in the film, isn't it? But you're right, that's the one where he's dancing because it means something, he's expressing himself.
And he's making it up as well. It's not...
It's impromptu.
Supposedly from the heart, from the passion.
It's not a routine that's been hammered into him. But that set piece...
in reality, of course it is.
the central set piece is very nice, very Lion King. But there's one bit where it came up, he went upstairs and then came down again, and it went down again. I thought that was a bit pointless. Do you remember that?
I can't remember that specific thing. I quite like the fact that his bedroom, which was just a bed on a staircase coming in and out. Yeah. I like, once again, we were talking about the sets. I like the set. I thought the set was very clever. It's essentially the inside of the working man's hut, which is also used for training the girls and boxing class, but is also...
bits move forward.
It pulls apart, becomes a kitchen. Yes, and there's a door on the left-hand side which becomes somebody's front door. It's also the door to the club. I don't know. It's imaginative, very smart.
Very English.
I'm so sorry?
Very English set design, if you think about it.
Yes, maybe.
You mean the thing, it looks like it's in England, or it has a very English feel to it? I'm not sure I entirely understand.
The Americans would have bits sliding on and off and backwards and forwards all the time, probably.
Would they?
Yeah, well, Caroline O'Change has given us an example of where there's a bit too much slidiness.
Well, there is an example of slidiness where Billy has to pull out a series of gentlemen's lavatory cubicles.
He does, exactly, yeah. No, so I don't know. There was a feeling, I was thinking, actually, yes, Blood Brothers, for example, could have done this had they had a bit more budget at that time. But
and technology, probably.
And I guess the technology as well.
Trestle wheels.
Yeah, exactly. They never had that in the Victoria.
But
so,
yes, do go and see...
Blood Brothers is famously set.
Do go and see Blood Brothers and Billy Elliot.
See Billy Elliot first, and then again afterwards.
They're very close to each other. Well, they're not.
Well,
No,
I
they're
guess.
not.
Well, I
No,
guess
one's a
if
Victoria.
your gossip is correct and Blood Brothers is indeed due to close, then I guess it is worth seeing before
Oh,
it
do
goes.
go and see it. It's not. I mean, it's not the
You have
worst
to
thing
make
that's
your
ever
mind
been.
up, don't you?
It's not the worst thing that's ever been in the West End, and it's probably worth seeing purely because it's run for 20 years, and it will give you a chance, you the listener, ladies and gentlemen, to say what you think about this. And of course, you should, and then phone in to us and tell us what you think.
Yes.
You may think what we've been saying today is a pile of balderdash, although I doubt it.
Well, and if Willie Russell wants to call in.
Now, in last week's episode, we mourned the passing of Deborah Carr. Is it Deborah Carr?
It's Deborah Carr.
Deborah Carr.
Deborah Carr, she's a star.
And Ned Sherrin.
She now actually is a star. Of course.
Do that again. And
And Ned Sherrin, yes.
This week, last month, on Halloween, October 31st, we discovered that Robert Goulet passed away.
Yes, well, shall we talk about Robert Goulet? Robert Goulet, funnily enough, not everyone may have heard of him, but if you like, he might be one of the last remnants of the 1950s heyday of music, that last heyday of musicals. Probably most famous for appearing as Sir Lancelot in the original Broadway production of Camelot.
Not Spamalot.
Camelot by Lerner and Loewe.
Just dance a lot.
Now, just briefly, Camelot isn't very popular necessarily with a lot of music fans because the film is monumentally diabolical and has...
My neighbour was Vanessa Redgrave. How dare you say that? I love the film.
Fine, Vanessa Redgrave, that internationally renowned singing star.
She was hot in it.
Was she? I couldn't tell. She looked perfectly comfortable temperature-wise to me. But the point is that the original cast on the Broadway show were
Julie
deemed to be
Andrews.
British. Julie Andrews, Robert
Harris.
Goulet, Richard Harris. Was Richard Harris in the original?
I think so.
I'm not sure, but whatever. It was all considered very good, and many people have lamented the fact that the original cast weren't put in the film. He then went on to do... Well, he did quite a lot of shows. Just very quick run-through. These are just the musical shows he did. Sunshine Town, Thunder Rock, Optimist, Dream Girl, Carousel of Sir Lancelot in 1960, won a theatre award, came back and played the King when it was revived in the 90s, Finian's Rainbow, Little Women, The Happy Time, won a Tony Award, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, The Pyjama Game, Beggar's Opera, Bells Are Ringing, Meet Me in St. Louis, The Happy Time, I Do, On a Clear Day, Kiss Me Kate, The Fantastics, Rosemary, South Pacific, Moon Over Buffalo, Man of La Mancha, South Pacific, and La Cage aux Folles in 2005 when it was revived on Broadway.
46 seconds.
And more interestingly, he was actually offered one of the original La Cage aux Folles posts when it came out, and he declined it. He's also appeared in a couple of musical films, one with Judy Garland in the animated cat version, which we've spoken about, called Gay Purrie. And most famously of all, he's Wheezy the singing penguin in Toy Story 2, when he sings You Got a Friend in Me at the end, in the style of, well, obviously, Robert Goulet, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Television appearance, very famous television appearance you must be aware of, Nick. In The Simpsons?
Was he?
He appeared in The Simpsons. Yes, he
There's
appeared
so
in...
many episodes of The Simpsons, they all blend into one after
Yes,
20
he,
years.
It's the
he only
ep-
appeared in one, though.
He's in the episode called Springfield, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Legalised Gambling,
yes.
when Bart has a casino in his treehouse, and Robert Goulet plays a very amusing
I guess
cameo
he
in that.
sort of comes in and sings Jingle Bells. or
He
something.
sings Jingle Bells, Batman Smells, Robin Laid an Egg, The Batmobile Lost Its Will, and The Joker Got Away in the style of a sort of lounge singer. He swings his microphone and knocks out Millhouse.
in the treehouse.
There's also a lovely moment when he gets into the treehouse and he says, I can't believe...
It's not butter.
I can't believe I've been booked into this venue or something like that. And Nelson Muntz says... Your agent said to you to shut
Says
up.
what?
I hear the first cuckoo of spring, ladies and gentlemen.
You're able to get that door oiled.
Anyway, the punchline's very good, ladies and gentlemen. Go and see it. I'll tell you the late punchline later. Born in 1933, in Canada, actually. Oh, no, sorry, born in Massachusetts, went to live in Canada because his parents were French-Canadian. Studied opera at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto. Tried to get into Broadway shortly after that and ended up selling writing paper at Gimbel's. So went back to Canada, where he did get on the stage, got into South Pacific, and then returned to America to try again, and finally debuted in Ohio.
With or without exclamation mark?
I can't say.
Is that the sequel to Oklahoma?
Yes, he had a
There were
massive...
famously 49 sequels to Oklahoma.
He, well, you mean all the states that begin with an O?
No, I think...
Well, I don't know. Sorry, ladies and
I
gentlemen.
believe there are... Well, anyway,
So
we'll talk
how many
about
counties are there in America?
We'll talk about the topology of America
The
later on.
Topol.
Yes.
He really
on the roof.
He had the most shocking stage fright as a child. He used to perform at family gatherings and was made to dress up as Al Jolson. He did
God!
Well, it was 1933.
Mammy, presumably.
Well, yeah, 1933 though,
Yeah.
or early 30s.
Oh,
he did so well at this. His family all applauded en masse and gave him lifelong stage fright, or certainly stage fright for many years. At age 11, 2 nuns stopped him and said, "You're going to sing on Saturday night at the church function," to which he replied, "No, I'm not," and to which they replied, "Yes, you are," and grabbed him by the hair and led him away. And he then sang at the church function.
It's a far cry from The Sound of Music, really, isn't it?
Maria wasn't there to calm them, you see.
Clearly.
But he did sing at that church function and made his father cry, and that's when he realised that he did actually have a gift. No. And later on, he was appearing in Camelot, so this is 1960.
Mm-hmm.
Lord Olivier came to see it and noticed that he was frightened of...
Lord Olivier, even.
Lord Olivier. Lawrence, don't you know?
Larry
Olivier.
You said Lord Olivio.
Did I?
It's butter.
Oh, yes, that's right. I can't tell him from...
I can't believe I'm watching the show, he said. Carry on.
Lord Olivier came to see him in Camelot in 1960, spotted that he was very frightened of live audiences, and so after the show went up to him and said, "We can't see enough of your eyes. Can you wiggle your ears?" Goulet said, "Yes, I can." And then Olivier said, "Well, do it then." And at the next matinee, that's exactly what he did. Goulet started wiggling his ears and suddenly realised he'd lost completely all his stage fright. He thought, if I can do something silly like that on stage.
That's clever.
Yeah, it's worked. Famously had a sense of humour, Robert Goulet. He said himself, you have to have a sense of humour to be able to laugh at yourself. And he was very taken by one of the lines in Man of La Mancha, which is one of the musicals he plays, spoken of the Duke in the play by Don Quixote. And he says, he carries his self-importance as if afraid of breaking it. And Robert Goulet said, that amused me immensely. No one should ever take himself that seriously. And by this stage, he was getting over it. He famously lampooned himself in much of his later career. He was a huge fan of basketball and used to advertise it on American television. Rather famously said, "The 2 sweetest words in the English language after chorus girl are college hoops." College hoops being a form of basketball, I think.
Indeed.
And, of course, he wasn't afraid of using a few old chestnuts as well, because he broke his femur in the 90s and asked his surgeon if he'd be able to dance afterwards. And, of course, the doctor said yes. And he said, "That's good, because I couldn't dance before."
Joining us on the show is, once again, Michael de Gaetano. Thank you, welcome. Sadly, we're mourning the death of Robert Goulet. Now, you have a couple of stories to tell about him, because you worked very closely with him one time, didn't you?
Back in 1997, I worked with HBO and the Fox network to bring back Get Smart. And we were shooting an episode, Casino Evil, that took place in a Las Vegas casino looking for international spies, etc. And Robert, who just was a great guy, I mean, he knew he was a great singer and a great performer, but he liked to make a wink at himself and just make fun of his whole persona of that, good-looking, classical voice kind of guy, where a lot of people just don't want to make fun of themselves, but he always had a good time doing it. So we invited him to come on the show to play the part of a singing spy. And in the big climactic lounge scene while he's singing a song, he suddenly changes the lyrics of Max the Knife when he sees that there are some bad guys trying to kill Maxwell Smart. And he changed the lyrics to "Hey Max, there's a knife," or "Hey Max, watch out for that knife." So it was just a fun segment, and he basically did it in 2 takes, and he just hung around the set because he really enjoyed the fact that some of us younger guys understood his prominence in the industry, and that we wanted him there. He had a good time because a lot of the stars of the show were of his generation as well, of performers, Don Adams, etc. So it was really, of all the shows we did, it was absolutely one of the most fun days on the set we ever had.
Did you ever have the chance of seeing him on Broadway at all?
No, I never did. I was a little bit too young to see him on Broadway. I didn't. When he was doing La Cage in New York, I was living in Los Angeles at the time. So our paths never crossed that way. But luckily, I got to work with the man one day. It was an absolute one of the most fun days I ever had working on a TV stage set.
That's a lovely tribute and a wonderful story to a wonderfully talented man. Thank you very much, Michael.
In fact, I'm going to go later and watch the tape of the show tonight, just to remind myself how much fun it was.
Well, it's add another voice, doesn't it?
You like Michael, don't you?
I do like Michael. I think he's always got something interesting to say, and I agree with everything he says, which is
why
I like him.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to Robert Goulet for giving us many, many, many years of his talent to the thespian world.
He was fancied both by...
men and women.
Yes, indeed. Judy Garland called him a living 8x10 glossy. And Truman Capote also famously said nice things about him. So, you know...
What was she referring to by the 8x10?
Oh, well, I was rather hoping it's the photograph.
Yeah.
Yes. Next week, we're going to finally have Paul Kiev on the podcast, who does what you love, Thos.
Has he been chicken up till now? Is that why he's not come?
He's a conjurer. He's not a magician. There's a difference.
He's an illusion designer, as we said, for such shows as Lord of the Rings, The Witches of Eastwick, The Witches, which was the Roald Dahl David Wood production, where he made a stage where the witches disappear, which is always a good thing. And we'll be having him next week, and hopefully a video podcast we'll be looking to in the future.
Oh, right.
Thank you very, very much for listening. Any questions or comments, it's feedback@musicaltalk.co.uk. I do urge you to go into the forums and get those up and running again, because they've been a bit dead lately. Thos, Tim.
Oh.
It's our fault, is it?
Right, okay.
Everything's your fault.
Well, let's do another Trashing Wicked episode and see if we can't get a bit of controversy going.
It's always your fault. I blame class. See you next week.
Anyway, as I was saying, the girl's father came after me with a shotgun, but fortunately we had stable doors.
This has been a production of Musical Talk. Copyright 2007.